Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Next door.
Okay, yeah. She's already on everything.
So after we get started.
Yeah. Okay.
I know, but they could probably do
It's fine. We lost our other panel, right? This might be lost. I want to.
just wait and press it.
Yeah, but you can let people know that.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Is this working? Can you hear this? Good morning, everybody. I just want to let you know we'll be starting in a few minutes, so feel free to maybe get your final drinks and some food, and everyone will still be filing in.
Oh yeah, there's still a little line.
Yeah,
we got time. It's 2 minutes after or whatever.
I don't have enough time. Yeah, I know. Hi.
I got a shot before we start.
Clean and dry, not like sweaty and exhausted.
I got down on Hawthorne. It's a really nice place. Technically,
Well, you know, they become the Buddhist bracelet, or, you know. Joyce, there's a seat right in front here for you. I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I was thinking, yes.
Years. Yeah. So pathetic. Yeah.
I printed out the clothes.
And I usually
You know, it's crazy. Instead of trying to find the link.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Animal Law Conference and one of our very first panels of the morning. So welcome. And I'd like to introduce Russ Mead and Chris Reed for Ethics in Animal Law.
So I'm just going to make a couple remarks before we start, and Chris is going to come up and start reading a scenario. Now, the way that we came up with this was we were sitting there thinking about all of the ways we've seen lawyer advocates get into trouble. And we put together a hypothetical that shows this fictitious lawyer who has done things to help animals that would have violated or maybe violated rules of professional conduct. So while we've seen all of these things happen, we have not seen them all in one place, which is what makes this kind of fun. Also, from feedback we've gotten in other years, we think this is going to be the most entertaining professional responsibility thing you have ever seen. Those of you who have had to attend CLEs to get we call them the ethics credit, I'm always thinking, oh my God, they're going to disbar us all. When you've got the head disciplinary person standing up front, talking about all of the ways they can take away your law license. So with that in mind, we are kind of shooting towards the same goal. We want you to keep your law licenses. And it is real easy to lose track of the fact that we are lawyers and we are bound by these rules of professional responsibility when we're out there advocating for, in this case, elephants. Wow, and of course I point it and there's the fictitious elephant. So these slides are just rotating around to give some visual interest, because these days, of course, we want visual interest in everything we do, and they really have no connection to the presentation other than the elephants, which is going to be the topic of today's presentation. And there are only happy elephants. There's no elephants in cages, dead elephants, ivory. These are just all happy elephant shots. So feel free to look up whenever we're not entertaining you sufficiently. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. We're going to get started. There are going to be 3 segments. We're going to read a hypothetical, and then we're going to talk amongst ourselves, as they say. You're not going to break into groups, but turn around and chat about what you hear, and then we will have a law school type, discussion about the materials that move on to the next segment. There are 3 segments, and then there's a nice wrap up to let everybody know the outcome of what has transpired. So with that, Chris.
It is pass fail, by the way, so. So, forgive me for actually reading this, but because it's an exact problem, we want to make sure all the language is precise. So, we are dealing with an issue that does involve elephants. So, I'm just going to dive right into it. There's Billy Miller is an attorney who volunteers at several animal nonprofits. Billy's main practice area is intellectual property. The local zoo has 2 elephants on exhibition. The elephants live in a tiny space, and many individuals and nonprofits are fighting to give the elephants more space. Billy attends a meeting of the No Zoo Coalition, and they're a group that objects to keeping any animals in zoos. The executive director of the No Zoo Coalition, Sam Smith, knows that Billy is a lawyer and has asked her if a city ordinance could be enacted to require the zoo to send the elephants to an elephant sanctuary in Ohio. Billy says she believes so, as the zoo is operated on city property. Actually, Billy had no clue if her answer was correct. She just wanted to look smart in front of the group. Shooting from the hip. Billy volunteers to approach the city attorney to find out the likelihood that such an ordinance might pass. Billy tells the executive director, quote, "I have a way to work the city attorney. She dated my brother, and I have some juicy dirt on her." Billy meets with the city attorney, Joey Hampton, and hears, quote, "The city council would never pass an ordinance drafted by the No Zoo Coalition. Those crazy animal rights nuts are against keeping any animals in a zoo. First it will be elephants, then it will be monkeys." Where will the madness end? Billy then attends a meeting of the Friends of the Zoo Elephants, different group. That organization is pushing for the zoo to eliminate the hippopotamus area just to make more room for the elephants. At the meeting, Billy says, quote, I've talked to the city attorney and learned that the city would probably reject a proposed ordinance made by the No Zoo Coalition to move the elephants to a sanctuary. But who knows? The city might be willing to support an ordinance that would expand the elephant exhibition area. Billy continues by asking, quote, "Would you like me to contact the city attorney to see if it would be helpful for Friends of the Zoo elephants to submit an ordinance requiring the elephants to have more space?" Unquote. The executive director of Friends of the Zoo elephants told Billy, "Have at it." So with that, we'll hand it over to Russ to lead the discussion.
So we're going to break, so turn around and talk to folks in small groups, 5, 7, and try to work out where you think this is heading. So that's part of this interaction between your colleagues. So take about 10 minutes or so and start chatting about what you see in this hypothetical.
And I think the hypothetical is in your materials as well. If you want to revert back to that, you can.
Are you sure?
I was told that.
Well,
It's on the CD,
excitement about ethics at 8:17 in the morning, and that's one of the nice things about this format. It keeps everybody going. So let's talk about what we see. How about and I'll kind of bring up a topic. How about the fact that she is an IP lawyer? Does that play into this at all? Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, it could. She has to have some expertise, obviously.
She has to have some expertise. Now, how much expertise do you need to have as a lawyer to be able to comment, give advice, do what lawyers do? Could I take I've never done an IP thing in the world. Could I go off and pick up an IP client?
If you know more than the client.
Pardon me?
If you know more than the client.
If I know more than the client. So as long as you can get into Wikipedia, you're golden. All right, so how much do we need to know? I mean, do we need to know the most? Do we need to be, an expert?
Enough to be competent.
Enough to be competent. That's right. So what we have to do is prepare. We can take virtually any kind of engagement we want, with the exception of some intellectual property types of things, which are restricted. And as long as you get yourself up to speed and you can adequately represent your client, you can have at it. So the fact that she's an IP lawyer, isn't going to stop her from commenting or having this kind of client. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. I'm
Okay.
a law firm, so I'm just wondering, do you all have criteria that tell you when somebody's competent?
I see lots of people in the audience. I know what. How do we know if we're competent? Somebody give me something really concise that would be quotable on this.
You don't get a disciplinary complaint?
We don't get a disciplinary complaint. The answer is we don't. There isn't. I mean, we're a self-regulating group in that regard. We have to know what our clients need, and then bring ourselves up to a level of knowledge to be able to adequately represent them. So it's pretty undefined. I never thought of that. I mean, think of how undefined it is. That's maybe my takeaway for this conference. Yeah. Think of what we're tasked to do and how little parameters there really are around it. Now, how about the off-the-cuff comment? We threw in there that she wanted to impress folks. Have anybody ever seen this, by the way, where a lawyer just wants to seem important, and that's why they're giving the comment, and they really don't know what the hell they're talking about? I mean, has anybody ever seen that in a nonprofit situation? Never. Yeah. So we see this. So don't be that lawyer, right? Don't be that person. Would that violate the competency rule? If you're sitting there giving an off-the-cuff comment and you really don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, would you have just had an ethical violation, you think? I'm getting a lot of up and down heads. Yeah, I think that's probably right in this case. But there's a far bigger question here. It's like, is she their lawyer? Is she their lawyer? We're getting some yeses. We're getting some. Do you think she feels like she's their lawyer by at the initial stage of throwing out, what she thinks the law is? Or yes, I think an ordinance would work in this case. Is that enough in a public setting to stand up? If one of you stood up and started speaking to somebody else, are you their lawyer? What kinds of things? Got to know. So let's explore that a little bit, because this is real important in these nonprofit situations where we are volunteering or we're just somewhere. Where do we cross that line? I mean, how do we tell? Is it our perception that matters, or is it the client's perception? Right, it's always going to be the client. That's the easy question, right? It doesn't matter what we think. If we don't think they're the lawyer, that doesn't really matter at all. It's, do they think they're the lawyer? Now, what kinds of factors do you think a disciplinary board, it wouldn't be a court, a disciplinary board, would look at to see if the client was reasonably thinking that you represent them? What are some thoughts? Go ahead.
I think when the client approached you for legal advice, as they did here.
So if there's this great big book on the corner here, have Chris hold it up. These are the Annotated Rules, and when you teach this stuff, you have to actually look at cases and things. And there's a case that says pretty much just that if somebody asks you a legal question and you give them a legal answer, boom, you represent them. Does that not scare you? Raise your hand. I've been at a cocktail party, a bar, a CLE meeting, and somebody has come up and asked me a legal question, and the word out of my mouth wasn't, "Where's the restroom?" I mean, raise your hand, right? Yeah. All right.
I was telling first thing you learn in law school is only legal if you get caught.
Yeah. So be very, very careful about this because you could be the client. Now, if you do represent them, what kinds of things do you do when you normally represent somebody? Okay, an engagement letter. What else?
Get the money.
Get the money, get paid. It doesn't matter. Can you have a client and not get paid?
Yes.
Yeah, you can. So, good point.
I'm in this room, but I was working and not gotten paid.
How about conflicts checked? Yeah, I mean, you'll find that conflict checks on these kinds of things actually can be a lot more complicated than you think. You got board members, you've got all kinds of things. And by the way, do all nonprofits in one particular field, let's say animal endeavors, because that's what we're here for, do they all get along happy one big? Yeah. In New York City? Yeah, we got Jane Hoffman here from Mayor's Life. New York City, everybody gets along. Yeah, of course not. Of course not. You can have slight variations in the way an animal nonprofit can look at any particular issue and make them enemies. Make them sue each other, make them have totally different approaches. And so we have to be careful that it's not just all one, we're in there helping the animals, so everything's going to come out fine. All right, so how about the... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was calling.
It's interesting to say about the kind of shooting from the hip, giving the answer, because when people ask me about, hey, I need to find an attorney, one piece of advice I give them is when you're interviewing these attorneys, you ask them questions. The attorney that tells you, I don't know, the answer to a certain question, that's your attorney you want to hire. Because A, they're honest, B, they're going to go look up the answer. They're going to come back to you with the correct answer rather than just kind of wanting to seem omniscient, just shooting from the hip replacement, giving you an answer that you think you want to hear. So yeah, that's a really key thing. And also, if you're that lawyer saying I don't know, gets you out of the problem at the cocktail party, you didn't go dispense legal advice and something had a client that didn't know you had.
Great. How about this? I've got the juicy dirt. Let me go handle this. I got juicy dirt on the. Totally fine. Totally fine. We're totally fine with the juicy dirt comment. Totally fine. It's the that's a perspective here today. From a couple places. Is that another thought? Who else thinks that might not be? Or why? I'll just say it's probably not good. But anybody know why? All right, I'll tell you. You can't improperly try to influence a public official. So if you're, whatever that juicy dirt is that improperly influencing a public official? Again, I'm not looking for the New York perspective here, but some other perspective. Do you think that might be improper if you're digging up somebody's past with getting some nods? Somebody say yes. Somebody say yes. Okay, got it. So that is improper. That's probably a violation. And it's just the implication. The rule says that you can't imply that you're going to do this. It's not even just doing it. It's just the implication alone will get you. All right. How about the volunteering? Oh, I can go do that. I'll go make those calls. Anybody see an issue with that? So you're in this nonprofit situation. You're volunteering to do something. You're a lawyer. How might that get you into trouble? All right. Anybody remember the old ambulance chasing rules? Oh. Yeah. So why can't we? So there's you're following the ambulance to see where it leads. You get there. There's people who've just been in an auto accident. You're passing out your cards, right? You want to represent somebody. Can you do that? No, you can't do that. And why can't you do that? Just somebody summarize what a rule would say against it. You can't directly solicit somebody who you know or suspect needs legal representation. All right? So when you say, I'll go do that, is that directly soliciting the legal work? Somebody say yes, somebody say no. Yes. Yeah, okay, so why would it be yes? Go ahead. Pardon me?
To look into this issue.
When they ask for the question.
Yeah, when they ask, well, that's really smart. So if they retain them, you're off the hook. If they've said, yes, we want to, we've asked you the question, so that means we want to hire you, then we're fine. If they didn't ask the question, if some lawyer volunteers to do something and they haven't been retained, could that be solicitation? Could that be soliciting the client? It could.
Not if you're not getting paid.
Not if you're not getting paid. Somebody take an alternative view to that. Does getting paid matter in any of these rules? They don't matter. It doesn't. The rules of professional responsibility never make the distinction between getting paid versus not getting paid unless we're talking about one of those rules that talks about getting paid. So, and then of course it gets nuanced. But no, I mean, if you're representing, if I as a pro bono lawyer go out to help, some client, I'm on the hook. No matter if I get paid or not, every bit as much as if I, made New York City rates. It just doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that gets us into trouble because we're not getting paid. We're thinking, well, I'm just kind of helping out. I'm not really a lawyer. I'm just kind of helping out with some law knowledge. And there is no such thing as that. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about those things. How about, is there a conflict between the two organizations? All right, so what's the conflict between the two organizations?
One wants no elements and the other one wants just a larger enclosure.
Yeah, and raise your hand if you've seen that general concept before. Maybe not in Zoom, but yeah, we see that all the time. The incrementalism, we want no elephants in there, or we want happy elephants, or what we think are happy elephants. And can they be passionate about these positions?
Yes.
They can be very passionate about these positions. I mean, there can be lawsuits, there can be huge fights. In fact, and I know a lot of people in this room know these things. I've seen some of the biggest battles between animal nonprofits on issues like euthanasia policies, no kill. I mean, in this case, confinement. Veganism issues. It goes on and on and on, where different groups can actually really despise each other. And I've been involved in lawsuits like that. So,
even within organizations.
Yes. My experiences with animal organizations and that. So does Billy represent friends of the zoo elephants when they're saying, yes, I'll go do that. I'll go talk. We decided she does. So that's different from asking a question, isn't it? So if somebody asks you a legal question, you give a legal answer, you represent it. We've established that. How about volunteering to go and talk to somebody? You have to be a lawyer to go talk to a city attorney about a piece of legislation? No. Look at lobbyists. Lots of lobbyists aren't lawyers, and that's their business. So, is that a legal representation, or is that a volunteer activity? What do we think?
What does the client think?
Pardon me?
What does the client think?
There you go. So what does the client think? Does the client think, oh, we have to have a lawyer go talk to this person because they're talking legal stuff? If it's a legal stuff thing, then yes. If it's anybody who understands this issue can go out and do it, and the client feels that way, then I think we got a different situation. And then, how about this conflict between the two? I mean, the two organizations clearly don't think the same. We've come to the conclusion that there is a conflict here. Can the lawyer represent the second group, and if so, what would they need to do? Or are they just barred? No, if I started to represent the first group, I'm out of the box. I can never represent anybody again.
They can get written permission from the first client that they can represent the second.
Right. You can get a waiver, get a conflict waiver. This has come up. I want to represent these folks. I'm going to be helping the elephants. I know it's not in the way that you want to help the elephants, but I want to do this. Is it okay? If they say no, can you take the second client? No. You can't take the second client if they say no. So one of the things, the big takeaway for me for this segment is what I call the problem of the shifting client. And I have seen this, I don't want to say more times than I can count, but I mean, it would take a lot of fingers to count the number of times where I've seen a lawyer go in and want to help the animals. And there's a group of people, a group of organizations, a group of individuals, and they all want to help this group of animals. It's a hoarding situation. It's our friends at the zoo, it's the whoever, and it shifts on who's got the power, who's in the most powerful position to help the animals. And by the time the animals are ultimately helped, saved, or whatever, if it's a bad outcome, this could have shifted through 2 or 3 different groups. And if you're the lawyer that's in there trying to help the animals, it's almost impossible to weave through these potential conflicts. So how do you avoid that? So you want to be the person that helps the animals. You're not. How do you avoid this problem where you can go and help anybody you want because you want to help the animals? Because that's primarily what people's goal is when they do this. How would you do that? How would you make that happen? Yeah.
I think you have to set aside your ego and not assume you're going to be the one who helps the animals. Bring other lawyers in and have everybody represented by different attorneys if there are conflicts.
Got it. So you dance with them on the brim. That's a good approach. So you represent whoever you choose to align with, and they're your client, and you run through it, and then bring other people in to represent the other folks, and wherever that might lead. That's a great answer. Well, there's one other approach.
Joyce is therefore off the hook for.
I know, just gonna do that. Yeah, of course, yeah. How about if you didn't?
You don't function as a lawyer.
Yeah, don't function as a lawyer. You don't represent anybody. So I came to give a similar presentation to the Manhattan Bar, and the one thing they keep asking was, how do I avoid this attorney-client relationship? How do I not be their lawyer so that I can float? And I mean, in fact, they even talked about coming back and doing a CLE just on that one point. It was so important. So we'll spend just about 2 more minutes, and then we'll move to the next segment. How do we avoid being somebody's lawyer but still be able to participate in helping the elephants? What kinds of things can we do? No ideas. How do you not be somebody's lawyer?
Send them a letter.
Send them a letter. I don't represent you.
Non-engagement.
Non-engagement letter. Yes, I came to your meeting. I love your organization. I want to help, but I do not want to represent you. I do not represent you.
You're standing back.
Yeah. Yeah, and say that everywhere you go, every time you open your mouth. If you do that enough, and you've got it in writing, I think you can make a good case for, no, I'm here in volunteer capacity as a non-lawyer, and you can do that. But it's trickier. Joyce's approach is certainly keep you out of trouble if you just only represented one. The other approach is make it really clear you don't represent anybody. Go ahead.
A lot of times when I go into these meetings, I just sit back and I won't answer any questions, and everybody looks at me for answers, and I either just say, I don't have enough information to give you an answer, or I need to do more research, and I just take notes and then go back and do what I want to do to help you.
All right, I want everybody to give a round of applause for that answer. Yeah. And what's brilliant about that answer is that if you had a client walk into your office with a question, you would probably say, here's generally the law, but I need to go and research your particular facts and see where it fits within the law. And that's how we handle our clients, and that's how we should handle the clients even when we're volunteering. We should not be giving the comments off the top. Yes. Our final comment for this section.
And I agree with what you said, but I think we need to understand that we almost have a higher level of responsibility, because over and over again I've been with groups of potential clients or groups of non-attorneys, and they really are deferential. They're looking to the lawyer for answers. They're looking to the lawyer to do the lawyer stuff, spread the magic, and we need to be very sensitive about that and not just jump into that role.
Yeah. We got to be careful with our role as lawyers as well, the way we're perceived, and there are ways to handle that. What I see, and it maybe wouldn't always keep you out of trouble, but one of the things I say is I don't know enough to comment on this particular set of facts. I'd have to research it, but I'll give you a general black letter principle of law, and then you can state something just very generic. But say, I don't know if it applies here. So you kind of satisfied what they're looking for, but you have not become the lawyer. You've not answered their question. You've answered some other question. I've seen that balance. Again, I don't know what an ethics board would say about that. but at least that gets you out of that box and not been the jerk that answers the question. One last comment, and we need to move on.
Has anyone ever tried to represent the animal?
And yeah, we need that's a whole other session. And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And with that, we'll turn it over to the next segment, and we'll talk afterwards. I can tell you, lots of different ways people have represented them.
Are you going to read the?
Oh yeah, no, it's my turn. Yeah. Sorry, it's my turn. So I need glasses for this. Billy goes back to the No Zoo Coalition executive director and gives him the bad news that any ordinance proposed by the No Zoo Coalition would not be successful. Billy then reveals that the Friends of the Zoo Elephants wants to propose an ordinance that would require the zoo to give the elephants more space. The No Zoo Coalition executive director, Sam Smith, states, "We could never get behind an ordinance like that. Keeping an elephant in a larger prison cell is still keeping an innocent animal in jail. Go back and tell that sniveling city attorney that she needs to get on board with the idea of sending the elephants to Ohio, or we'll put up a billboard." So remember this. "We'll put up a billboard next to her mother's house saying, 'Mildred, you should have raised your daughter better. She's imprisoning elephants.'" Billy responds that she will talk with the city attorney, but does not think that this threat, the city attorney will support a bill to retire the elephants. Smith then says, "Billy, if you can get this bill passed, we will pay you $500,000 per elephant." Billy tells him, "Look, I won't threaten the city attorney, but I will go back and try again to see if I can get her support. But no, if you take the position of wanting to close down the zoos, you won't get anywhere. You will get more accomplished if you settle for making the lives of the animals better." Another one. Keep in mind, Billy is fed up with the two nonprofits not working together to make the lives of the elephants better. Billy posts on her Facebook page, never good, "Hey, my elephant-loving friends, it does not matter to me if the zoo elephants stay or go. What matters is that they have enough space to enjoy their long and beautiful lives." Disgusted, Billy never goes to see the city attorney on behalf of the No Zoo Coalition. So talk amongst yourselves.
All right, so what's the first big problem that jumps out? I'm going to sit down this early, my cool. So what's the first big issue that jumps out to folks about this one? Anyone? Viewer?
Well, the Facebook thing is obvious.
Well, Facebook thing, obvious. Well, we'll start at the top. So Billy goes back to the No Zoo Coalition director and gives us information that won't be successful, so that's okay, right? They're saying to the client, okay, I've done your bidding, and here's the information I'm coming back with. But then it reveals that the Friends of the Zoo Elephants wants to propose this sort of alternate ordinance that would do less than his actual client or her actual client wants to have happen. What's the first issue? What's the issue that jumps out there?
Potential confidentiality.
Confidentiality. So, as we talked before, does Billy actually represent the second group? Yeah, it seems like she kind of does. So, if she does represent that second group, what then is her duty to client number one?
Disclose the conflict.
Disclose the conflict. I mean, so the rules will say it's absolutely you can never represent with conflict, but you have to fully disclose. In fact, this is a specific one, so let's go to it. I'll read the actual rule. Let me pull it up here. So, sorry, I'm going to find it here. So, duty inform. So, it says, a lawyer shall not knowingly represent a person in the same or substantially related matter in which a firm or in which the lawyer formerly was associated and previously represented a client. However, unless, and this is the unless, the former client gives informed consent confirmed in writing. So, it's not just enough to disclose the conflict and have them nod their head. You have to put it in writing. So that's kind of the main issue here. You've got two people, and it is a substantially similar matter, and they are kind of diametrically opposed within this ground. People from the outside would consider them both to be on the same page, but they're obviously not. So then the No Zoo Coalition director says, go back and tell that sniveling city attorney she needs to get on board with the idea of sending elements to Ohio. What's the issue there? What if you just decide not to do that? Well, there's a duty. You actually have a duty to follow the client's objectives. Rule 1.2a says that, subject to paragraph, the lawyer shall abide by client's decisions concerning the objectives of representation, and as required by Rule 1.4, shall consult with the client as to the means by which they are to be pursued. So if you don't agree with what the client wants to do, you can't just say, well, I don't want to do that. You're representing them. You're working for them. They're paying you. You have the duty to do what they want you to do. We'll get into it in a sec, what your options are there. So what about the billboard? Go put up a billboard next to your mother's house saying, Mildred, you should have raised your daughter better. She's imprisoning elements.
Advising
against that? What's that?
Advising against it is potentially illegal.
Advising against it?
Depends on where they're putting the billboards.
Yeah, she says that. I mean, if
it's on their private property.
Defamation issue. I don't know if that is embarrassing, but the individual can sort of do it. You should advise them that it's probably, and may want to look into legality. But what about the rights? What about the duties of the attorney? Saying, go back to tell the city attorney, if you don't do this, we're gonna put up this billboard. What's the issue there? Got it. Who said that?
What?
Yeah. So, exactly. So, Rule 4.4 says that in representing a client, a lawyer shall not use means that have no substantial purpose other than to embarrass, delay, or burden a third party, or use methods of obtaining evidence that violate the legal rights of such a person. So, you can't threaten to just embarrass somebody or hold things in concern. So, actually, Billy had a right here. So Billy did the right thing when she then says, I'm not going to do that. I won't threaten the city attorney, but I will go back to see if I can get their support. So, Billy got that one right. So batting Bob. But right before that, we've got another issue. When they say, Billy, when the executive director says, if you go get this bill passed, we'll pay you $500,000 per elephant. Suddenly Bill's like, okay, I will go back and talk to her and see what I can get accomplished. What's the problem with the $1 million per elephant? Or $500,000 per elephant? $1 million total.
Too much?
What's that?
Too much? Unconscionable?
Well, yeah, I mean, there again are rules on reasonable attorney's fees. Would anyone think like $500,000 per elephant is reasonable? So there's, I was in an ethics discussion at the American Bar Association having a meeting that right now, playing hooky. We had an ethics discussion, and they were talking about one of these major tobacco litigation cases where the group of firms got $50 billion with a B dollars. And people would say, well, that's unconscionable, that's how can you justify that? And the attorney actually had a pretty rational answer. It said, look, the previous 30 years of litigation on this matter has literally bankrupted 12 law firms that have attempted this. In order to buy into that lawsuit, each firm had to commit to putting up $100,000 per month just to be part of the group, not knowing whether you're going to win or not. That's your ante. That's their opt-in fees, $100,000 per month. And then they worked on it for years and years and years and years. So actually, yeah, $50 billion might sound like a lot of money, but when you look at all what had come before, that might have been what it took to actually get someone to take that case. So what are the ways around? What's another way around this? If you expect that you're going to have a really big payout at the end of the road, what's your way around charging just an exorbitant fee? You get to the C, contingency fees. And what's the rule of contingency fees, though? Can it be, hey, how about we split this at the end of the lawsuit?
Be in writing.
Gotcha. Has to be in writing. So everyone's fully on board, so there's no dispute at the end of the day. Hey, wait a minute, you said we're going to take this, so. And that's just a good idea anyway, no matter what you're doing in this realm, put it in writing. Everyone's all hugs and kisses on the front end, and once money shows up, it's amazing how rapidly things can deteriorate. So put it in writing. So then when Billy says, when the executive director says, okay, go back and get $1 million, and Billy does the right thing, says, look, I won't threaten the city attorney. I'll go back and see if I can get his support. But I want you to know, if you take this position, this extreme all or nothing position of shutting down the zoos, you're not going to get anywhere with the city attorney. You will get more accomplished if you settle for this middle road solution of making the lives of the animals better. What do people think about that?
Like their clients.
What's that?
Well, it's good advice, except you're giving the advice that is what your other client wants to have happen.
That's true. So that gets into the conflict. But imagine put them in a vacuum, put her in a vacuum, and imagine there is no other client. And say Billy is just giving that advice because she really feels personally that that's the right thing that should happen in this matter. Is that permissible to do?
She has to counsel them.
Counsel? Yeah.
Just to tell them what you think.
But even if it's not just related to like their likelihood of success, if she actually thinks, hey, I think this is the right thing to do.
It has to do with the client's wants, obviously.
Has to do, but still with advice. This is an interesting one because people get hung up on a lot. But actually, it is permissible. Rule 2.1. I'll read the actual rule here. That it is actually okay to offer moral or political advice to a client, even if it's something that they may not agree with. But it is okay to. I mean, you're a counselor, so you're not just giving them nuts and bolts advice of like likelihood of success. You can, hey, look, there may be a better. People get caught in litigation, and they may kind of get overzealous themselves and want their pound of flesh. That may or may not have happened in a recent case, and I can't talk about, but other people learn. So certain people who have different agendas in litigation. Some people want to hammer something into the law and get a victory that can be expanded to other similar situations. Other people are just really upset about the situation and they want to make somebody pay. And so I think in those instances, you not only have the ability, but I think you almost have a duty. I mean, you don't formally have a duty, but just personally, offering my own moral advice in this situation, I think you have a duty to tell someone, hey, look, I know this is what you want, but this may not be the right thing here. So the actual rule says, in representing a client, a lawyer shall exercise independent professional judgment and render candid advice. In rendering advice, a lawyer may refer not only to law, but to other considerations such as moral, economic, social, and political factors that may be relevant to the client's situation. So you're not just this kind of nuts and bolts legal automaton. You're a counselor that's looking at the full panoply of issues related to this matter. And again, I think you sort of have a duty to let them know that this is what the best outcome might be. Okay, so now we get to the fun one, where it's posted on their Facebook page. It doesn't matter to me what the hell happens here. What matters, I feel something that actually directly poses. And then discuss it. Billy never goes and sees the city attorney on behalf of the No Sue Coalition. So what jumps out there the most? Anyone? Come on. What's the biggest issue there? You don't. The client tells you to go talk to the city attorney. You tell the client, sure, I'll go talk to the city attorney, and you just never talk to anybody. What's the issue there?
So complete abrogation of her duty to the client.
Yeah. And there's a certain word that we like to throw around. Begins with a D. Diligence. And it's a pretty certain. You know the rules are really important in that they don't have much explanation. This rule is about like 9 words. The whole rule is 9 words long. A lawyer shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client. Drop the mic. That's it. It's simple. So yeah. If you tell a client you're going to do something, they ask you to do something, you say, sure, I'll do it, and you never do it, straight violation. You're in big trouble. But what about the situation like this one, where Billy just disagrees? Saying, I think this is the wrong thing. Well, does a lawyer have an out there? Does a lawyer have the ability to say, hey, look, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I think you're taking a wrong approach here. What's the lawyer's options there?
She can ask her client to excuse her from representation and do it in writing.
Yep. Perfect. So Rule 1.16, declining or terminating representation. And 1.6b4 says a lawyer may withdraw from representing a client if the client insists upon taking action the lawyer considers repugnant or with which the lawyer has a fundamental disagreement. So it has to be substantial. You can't just say, I'm not representing you for the last year and a half, but I kind of got a little busy lately, so I'm just going to drop you like a rock. No, you kidding. It has to be, repugnant's a pretty strong word. Fundamental disagreement. You have to have really solid reasons for doing this, and again, it has to be in writing. So I think that's covers this. So we're running short on time, so we're going to do a little less time than that's. We've got about 17 minutes left. So I'm going to read this through real quick. We'll give you about 5 minutes to discuss, and then Russell will walk us through the rest of it. So now here we are. Facebook page has happened. Billy sort of walked away. Billy then attends a drum circle for the elephants. Cindy Snyder, a volunteer for Friends of the Zoo Elephants, group number 2, announces while dancing with her djembe, quote, I'm going to go over and cut the lock in the elephant gate and let them be free at last. I'm sure we'll get really far. Billy takes a long sweep of beer and says, just don't let them catch you. So like at the drum circle, Billy sits next to Randy Musgrove, a Silicon Valley millionaire who is on the board of Friends of the Zoo Elephants. They hit it off. Drinks are flowing. Randy invites Billy to his palatial house to see his 19th century etchings of elephants. Fish tank that would make it better. While enjoying yet another Pacific Northwest microbrew, Randy asked Billy if she thinks giving $50,000 to the city attorney's election fund would help move her thinking along. Billy was ecstatic. Hell yes, she says. Again, giving legal advice, full of beer. Randy went to his safe and pulled out $50,000 in cash. By the end of the night, Billy and Randy are doing more than just rolling around on top of $50,042, which is Randy's $50,000 plus the $42 that Billy had in her purse at the time. Talk amongst yourselves.
So we got a couple of fun things. So what do we think about the? And make no mistake, they had sex. So so what do we think about that? So what do we think? Pardon me?
Oh, come on, guys.
It's not ethical.
It's not ethical. All right. So anyone know what the rule? I mean, I have to like quote the rule, but what's the rule about having sex with clients? Don't. See, that's actually not the rule. You can't have sex sex with a client unless you had a prior sexual relationship with that person prior to representation. Now, I'll tell. I think this is a fun story, but it was in a classroom setting, with law students, and this came up. And in all honesty, one of the students says, "Well, what you need to do when you go and you volunteer for a new nonprofit is check out all of the hot people, have sex with all of them first, and then if you want to represent you're clean." And that's it. So I thought it's a different environment when you're in the law school setting. All right, so a quick point, is this board of directors, is that a client? Is board of directors? Who's a client, who's not a client? Does everybody work for the place a client?
The client's the nonprofit, not necessarily the board of directors. So if the board of directors themselves individually get in trouble, you're representing the nonprofit. The board of directors has to get their own representation.
What the rule is go ahead. Yeah.
Representing the not-for-profit, aren't you representing the board of directors? Yes.
The answer to that is yes, and it's nuanced. The way to look at this is, or the way in that big blue book, if you're having a direct conversation or you deal with somebody at the nonprofit, then that's the person you can't have sex with. So if you're talking about the American Red Cross and you're talking about an aid worker, and you're probably okay. But if you're dealing with the board members, then it's not okay. If you're talking about even a mid-level person, a low-level person, but because of the representation you have contact with that person, then they're off the or they're on the don't have sex with list. There is one.
I think there's one project we had here somewhere.
Yeah. All right. How about the money? Co-mingling, the $42. Co-mingling the funds there, right? It's fundable. It's cash. It's not even checks. That was co-mingling. And when you look at, not that you want to do this, it's depressing, but when you look at the people who recently lost their law licenses or been suspended, co-mingling is right up there. You're co-mingling funds. You're in trouble. So no co-mingling.
And co-mingling is such a loose word. I mean, yesterday it's like, it's theft. I mean, when they say all the words co-mingle, it means you're using your money as yours. You guys cannot do that.
Yeah, it's always wrong. Yeah. Okay, how about this drum circle thing with talking about cutting the elephants loose, and her comment, don't get caught. How do you feel about that?
Encouraging someone to break the law?
Yeah, you can't participate. There's just a rule about it that says it's 1.2D. You can't advise somebody on how to commit a crime, and that was our way of showing this. Do it, but don't get caught. Could be construed as working with somebody to show them how to commit a crime. You can't do that. Now, this actually does come up, from time to time in the situations we're in, when particularly when people. They're getting angry. They're angry at the bad people who are hurting the animals, and oftentimes you will hear somebody talk about something that's illegal. Let's let the chickens free. Let's do this. Let's do that. Yeah.
If she had opted instead not to say anything at all, does she have any obligation to advise the person not to engage in illegal activity?
You can't advise somebody on how to do it, and then there's some really technical rules on your obligations if you hear about it. So I won't go into them because we don't come across this that often, but if it involves hurting somebody or really hurting their property, there can be an obligation to go and report. But I'm just going to say this. If you're ever in that situation, don't trust anything I say. Go grab the rules and read the cases, because you're in deep at that stage. This is something... Just the red flags go up. Somebody's not.
They say go look it up.
Yeah, go look it up. That's when you got to get into the nuance of, because you're up against a bunch of other ethical rules in terms of confidentiality. And so, in fact, if my advice to you, if you found yourself in that situation, would be go hire counsel yourself. That's not one I would do it yourself. But I don't think you can come across it that often where somebody's talking about killing somebody or burning a place down. But if you find yourself in that situation, research it and then hire counsel to help me. And also the ethics board. There's every state's got an ethics board that you can call and they'll help you with your stuff. Certainly, that's another place to go. Yeah, boy, that got us onto a serious plane pretty quick. Let's see. How about You can also withdraw, I'll just do the rule 1.16b3. You can withdraw if a client uses your advice to break the law. So, I mean, you will find yourself in this situation where somebody's saying, oh, I can't do that, it's against the law. And you say, good, it's against the law. And then you say, well, but you can do it this way. Have we been in those meetings? And then you explain a way that is legal. But there's a problem with that because if you're teaching them how to commit a crime, now you're in trouble. And so you have to be really careful in the way you phrase the language when somebody's talking about doing something. You can't say, do it this way, because now you can be construed as helping them commit a crime. The better approach is to say, what I can tell you is this is illegal. Boom. Now you've advised them what the law is. You're not giving them the workarounds. And just in general, this would be more of an opinion, just stay away from that. I mean, this is wrong, leave the room, go drink your beer somewhere else, go to some other drum circle. Yeah, you don't want to be, because people aren't going to really remember the nuance of what you said in the drunken drum circle, and next thing you know, you're going to find yourself in the, against those ethics people, which we don't want to be. Let's see, I think that's, yeah, go ahead.
Can I go back to the co-mingling?
Sure.
Would it be okay if the board of director asked the question, would it help if I gave this $3,000 to the Friends of the Elephant? And the lawyer said, oh, sure, of course, that would be great, that'd probably help. I mean, without mingling her own $42 and the whole sex thing, I mean, would that
well, again,
it's like the obvious thing that anyone would say, including an attorney who's trying to meet her client's objective.
So is the question, can we take the money and give it to the city attorney?
Well, can she direct out the board of directors to say, oh, sure, that's a great idea, go give the money? I mean, is that...
What do we think about that? Anybody ever have clients that contribute to political campaigns? Yeah. Depends on the jurisdiction, depends how they're set up. There are some places where there's elected officials and you can make donations. There's all kinds of election laws you got to go check out.
Yeah. So the big issue here is that it's cash. If he had a check that was then put in an escrow account, a separate account, then there'd be less issue. But it's the actual mixing. So no commingling of funds or fluids is the.
That's what I'm asking. If there was no commingling, it would be okay, or it wouldn't be okay.
You can't commingle the funds. You might be able to take the money and give to the official if it complies with whatever the local laws are, and they can be different.
Yeah,
they can really be different. So
especially nonprofits.
Yeah, I've been through this. What's legal in one state can be illegal in another state. Yeah, and then.
But would the issue be that he specifically asked her, if I give $50,000 to this woman, will I get influence that I can use to then get the law that I want? I mean, to me, that's the bigger issue. Rather than just a random campaign, he's asking her, if I give her this money, will I get good influence over that? Right.
Well, it depends. Now, that just depends on how it's given. I mean, if it's just given as a donation.
But she said, hell yes, when he asked, if I give $50,000, will I get it?
Well, he asked, do you think it would help?
Do you
She
think
said,
it would help? Yeah.
Nobody really knows. It seems like she should say that. I mean, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that would be her opinion.
And we've covered that a little bit earlier. We actually are allowed to give political advice. So giving an answer like that would be...
The takeaway is, on the piece about making contributions, it's got to be it's got to comply with local, whatever the state and local laws are, the federal ones too. So make sure you're in compliance. It might be okay, might not be okay. I'm going to wrap this up. We have just a couple of minutes. So this is how it all concluded. Cindy Snyder, she was the person that was going to free the elephants. Cindy Snyder went to the zoo and sang lullabies to the elephants through the lock gate rather than letting them loose. They sang back. Without any new ordinances, the zoo retired the elephants to the Ohio Sanctuary and replaced them with an interactive virtual exhibit on elephants. The city attorney was reelected in a closely contested race. She did so by running a series of expensive radio ads highlighting her pro-animal community support. And Billy now travels around the world with Randy Mosgrove photographing elephants in natural habitats. So with that, thank you for having